Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and whatever other time of the day it may be. For those of you who've watched my things before, you may wonder, wow, you look a little different. To which I have to say, it's almost Halloween. Why not put on a little bit of a costume, right? For those of you who are new, I normally don't dress up like this. Um, so today, assuming everything goes to plan, this should be coming out on the anniversary of Pikmin 1's Japanese release. And so to celebrate the anniversary of my favorite game series, I thought, why don't I rank all the Pikmin in each main game? As you can see, I've got the chart over here. I was considering doing a regular tier list, but I saw that a Tiermaker has an option for like an alignment chart thing instead. So I thought that seems more interesting than just doing a standard tier list. Credit to SilokHawk, who originally made this Tiermaker for their Ultimate Pikmin Tier List video. I'll leave a link to that in the description if you want to watch it. So, how are we gonna do this? Well, as you can see, we have the scales are combat, powerful to weak, and tasks useful to useless. Which I think is probably the easiest way to rank the Pikmin, right? Like, what are you gonna do? Well, yeah, if I'm doing a chart, what else could I put on these, Unless I'm doing, like, a silly thing, but based on actual, like, in-game usefulness, I think this is the best way to rank them. So, let's get right into it, shall we? Kick the music. Alright, now, starting with Pikmin 1's Red Pikmin. I'm not sure what I want to say. I think, on combat, well, they're definitely pretty powerful. They're fairly useful. I mean, I wouldn't put them like all the way up here. This is like the absolute number one best Pikmin and everything. But like they're pretty powerful, they're pretty useful, but there's a fair few treasures in Pikmin 1, not treasures, fair few ship parts in Pikmin 1 that you don't need them for, or that you can't get them for, like the ones in the water, right? So the ones that are high up, there's puzzles that don't use red Pikmin at all. So like they're fairly useful for a lot of ship parts. They're the Pikmin that is good at fighting in the game. Now, yellow Pikmin. They can wield bomb rocks, which could put them up as fairly powerful in battle as well. However, depending on the release you're playing, it can be pretty fiddly to get the bomb rocks to work right. They're kind of, and you have a limited supply. So I'm going to put them like a little bit over the powerful scale, a little bit more powerful. And there's not that many ship parts that actually need yellow Pikmin, so we'll put them sort of... They're more useful than useless, but they're not that strong either. They're just sort of there. Because the thing is, without bomb rocks, their different throwing art can make them kind of annoying to use in battle. Now we go to the blue Pikmin. I'd say these guys are... In context of Pikmin 1, I'm going to put them on the weak side, because they don't have, like, a unique combat trick. Right? Like, red Pikmin are powerful all around, yellow Pikmin are inconsistently powerful with bomb rocks. So in comparison to the others in Pikmin 1, I think blue Pikmin fall under weak. However, there are shortcuts through water, there are puzzles that you need blue Pikmin for. I would call them fairly useful for their tasks because they can take a couple of shortcuts the other Pikmin can't in a handful of regions. And of course, there's a lot of treasures you can... Why do I keep calling them treasures? It's a handful of ship parts you can only get with the blue Pikmin. So I think we'll move the blue Pikmin to be around as useful as the reds. Then we go into Pikmin 2 and their adorable, charming clay models. So, I think I'm going to put the red Pikmin about as powerful as they were in Pikmin 1. So we're going to move this back a little bit. I think red Pikmin are slightly less useful than blues in terms of tasks. But with the advent of fire hazards, I think we can say that in Pikmin 2, red Pikmin are about as powerful but more useful. Be a little bit stronger because there's fire enemies that they're immune to. There's enemies that only the red Pikmin can fight, like the fiery ball blacks. So I'll make them slightly more powerful because there's a few niche edge cases there. But with fire hazards, I think they're more useful than in Pikmin 1. Yellow Pikmin, on the other hand, I'm going to put like weak for combat because they have lost their bomb rocks. However, I'll put them back up about like their throwing arcs. However, being the only Pikmin that, well, the only regular Pikmin that doesn't instantly die to electrical attacks, I think puts them on neutral in terms of this. And like being able to break down electrical hazards and that sort of thing in caves, very useful to have. I would not call them useless for tasks by any means. So I think we're gonna put them. There's more. I think there's more uses for yellow Pikmin in 2 than 1. Obviously, it's a longer game, but you know what I mean, right? So we'll do this. They're on the line of neutral in combat. Okay, now we get to blue Pikmin. As the last Pikmin type you get on a regular playthrough, they're... Yeah, I don't know. You can get, like, most of the treasures without them, because they're the last one you get out of 5 types. Although there are things you need them to unlock, like there's overworld treasures that are underwater. They make a lot of treasures easier to get, which I think definitely makes them useful. They are like, for a lot of treasure, they are a convenience with shortcuts and movement with shortcuts and that sort of thing. Not having to build bridges, maybe. That sort of stuff. So they're definitely useful. I think, however, they would be less useful than they were in Pikmin 1. I'm a little stumped on their combat utility. Maybe we... Because there's not that many, like, water-based enemies, you know? There's what? There's the watery blowhog. There's, like, the water attack the final boss has. There are enemies that spawn in water, but, like, most of them you can lure onto dry land if you want to fight them with other Pikmin. I think, I don't know. We're looking at this, right? And I'm thinking maybe blue Pikmin can go in the, because they're baseline neutral. They're not, you know, more powerful or weaker than other Pikmin. So I think blue Pikmin are probably more useful than yellow Pikmin in Pikmin 2 for tasks, but not by much. And they are about as useful in combat. So we'll do like roughly there. Now, purple Pikmin. In Pikmin 2, we know they are the most powerful Pikmin in the entire series in Pikmin 2. We can definitely put them there. And although they have their ability to carry 10 worth of items, I'm gonna be completely honestly, I kind of want to put them leaning towards being closer to useless than super duper useful. Because they're just so slow. Pikmin's a game all about time management, right? You've got to manage your time. Although, yes, in the caves, it's more of a dungeon crawler without a time limit, so you can take your time there. But, like, it's about trying to beat the game, collect all the stuff in as few days as possible, right? So, a Pikmin that's slow, that just means I don't think that's very useful. Their combat ability, combat ability, top notch. I would put them over the limit. In fact, I might retroactively move every Pikmin down slightly on the combat scale just to emphasize how powerful the purple Pikmin are. Well, not every Pikmin, 2 Pikmin. Every Pikmin 2 Pikmin I have moved further down purely to show like how more powerful the purples are. Because of that stun ability. Mwah. Mwah. Yes. There's a reason pretty much every single Pikmin 2 mod will like nerf them to hell and back. Oh, hold on, I forgot to make the music loop. Give me a second to fix this. Okay, there we go. So the thing is, right? Purple Pikmin, yeah. Their carrying capacity of 10 is really useful in caves in particular. So I'm not going to put them too useless, because there's no time limit in the caves. But it's really annoying to use them on the overworld because of how slow they move. So I think that's a good placement for them. Oh, white Pikmin. White Pikmin are only good in the combat if they die. Now, I will state that in the GameCube and Wii versions of Pikmin 2, they are the same strength as regular Pikmin, but the Switch re-release, I believe, changed them to do half damage compared to the other Pikmin types, like they would in later entries in the series. As for that reason, the Switch version is the most accessible version of Pikmin 2 at this moment. I'm going to put them at, like, really, really weak. However, poison hazards are fairly plentiful. You know, I'll put them slightly above bare minimum because there are poison enemies that they have a niche against. However, poison hazards are fairly plentiful, if I remember correctly, and their ability to carry things really quickly. I would put them all the way over there, but I'm gonna be honest, most of Pikmin 2 takes place in the caves, so I can't. I'm gonna put them like sort of over here. I would call them a little bit more useful than the red Pikmin are. A little bit less useful than the red Pikmin are because their niche of being really fast, most of the treasures you don't have a time limit for, which sort of puts a damper on that. But oh, Bulbman, now we get to my beautiful baby boy, the Bulbman. I'm gonna put them, even though their strength is the same as yellows and blues, I'm going to put the Bulbman about as powerful in combat as the reds, because of their ability to be immune to every single status in the game. Not status, every single hazard in the game except explosions, which nothing's immune to. So you look at this, right? Hazard, yeah. Honestly, I think they kind of toe the line on useful, useless. Because the thing is, they're immune to every single hazard, which is great. You can only get them in select caves, which they're basically there to serve as like a backup for if your other Pikmin die. If Pikmin die in the cave, then you fight, and then there's a Bulbman monster enemy. You defeat the enemy, you take the little ones for your squad. I mean, if you're good at the game, you're probably only going to see them in like the submerged castle. You know? I think Bulbman can stay on the line. They're sort of like baseline utility. I wouldn't call them bad for tasks, but you get them they're so rare, and you can't take them out of the. If you could take them out of the caves, they would be the best. I'm gonna be honest, if you could take Bulbman out of the caves, I would actually consider them the best Pikmin type in the game. Completely. Okay, so we're gonna go out of order for Pikmin 3. We're gonna do white and purple Pikmin first. These Pikmin are only available in the challenge modes, like the challenge side modes. So we're gonna take both of these, and I'm gonna be honest with, I'm gonna put like purple Pikmin in Pikmin 3. In Pikmin 3, I think they're actually more useful for tasks than in Pikmin 2, because the levels are specifically designed around purple Pikmin. Like you have to open shortcuts for them. You can do this, that, the other thing. You can use them to, white Pikmin, however, I would call still pretty weak. Anyway, the reason I would call probably about the same spot as in Pikmin 2, but I'll make them like less useful and weaker because you can't get them. They're not renewable, and they're not exactly renewable in the challenge modes, and you can't use them in the main story. Oh yeah, the reason that purple Pikmin are weak in 3 is because they're like stun attack. It's called, like, they still flop down on things, but then they just bounce off. They don't actually like stun the enemy. So they're basically just in combat, they're kind of worse reds in 3. Speaking of reds, red Pikmin are now... I think the red cluster, the little cluster of red Pikmin over here, I think they're probably about as good in, like, every game. Their baseline, they're, like, pretty good in fighting, they're pretty good for tasks, but they're not, like, outstanding in anything. They're, like, an all-rounder that's a little bit better. They're average, but their average is a bit better than everything else. Get what I mean? They're just sort of above average in everything. They don't have any particular weaknesses or strengths overall. Well, they have their combat strength, but you know what I mean. Yellow Pikmin. They have bomb rocks back. However, every Pikmin has bomb rocks back, so we can't do that, but... And electrical hazards have been nerfed to... I think they just stun Pikmin? I think they stun Pikmin, but if you leave them stunned for too long, then they die. Which... I mean, it means that electrical enemies are more interesting, but it also means that yellow Pikmin are weaker. So, we're gonna put them, like... on sort of mid-weak. Weak mid-combat. Sort of over here for tasks. Because there are very few fruits that you can throw them up to. You get them pretty early. There are the there's the electricity puzzles. Not puzzles, but the gimmicks where you have to like find the thing to light up the room and then it makes the platform flowers bloom. Those are cool, those are fun. That gives an extra use to them, so there's more tasks they can do that the other Pikmin can't. There's a fair number of like electrical gates and such. The problem is that they're not more useful because a lot of stuff that's just high up, the winged Pikmin can get because they can fly, and they can get it better. There are like yellow Pikmin puzzles that the winged Pikmin can just skip. Pardon me. But yeah, we'll move on to blue Pikmin. Blue Pikmin are the last ones you get again, which kinda sucks. By the time you get them, there's not really much water left to do. Like, you can go back to a couple of previous areas to pick up a handful of stray fruits. Like, there's a few in the Twilight River. Obviously there's the Garden of Hope, which has its little secondary area, but that's like just a really small zone. Like, blue Pikmin are basically just go back to previous areas and get like 2 or 3 fruits each. Just to blow up, just to make you have to take more days, I guess. you know, it's not really... They're not really... I'm not going to call them bad. Like, they are useful. But the fact that you get them so late in the game and there's not really much left to do after you get them, I can't call them, like, particularly useful. It's not like Pikmin 2, where... It's not like Pikmin 1, where the whole area there's a whole... 2 areas after. There's the area you get them, and then there's a whole zone after, and then there's the final boss. It's not like Pikmin 2, where... Sure, you get them by revisiting an area. Or you get them on a revisit to the second area, which... you know, you've already been to the 3 main areas. But Perplexing Pool has a lot more water, a lot of stuff. There is the submerged castle, which you can only get into, which you can only take blue Pikmin into. There's the Wistful Wild, you know, there's a lot more to... I think there's a lot more to do with blue Pikmin in previous games after you get them than in Pikmin 3. So I'm going to call them less useful for tasks in comparison to previous blue Pikmin. They actually have a niche. They do have a niche in combat, which I believe they have a niche where they get more powerful, like they do more damage to enemies in the water, which means you have a reason to fight enemies in the water rather than trying to lure them onto land. So we're gonna put them, be like here. You know, they're kind of useful, but not too useful for tasks, but they have a little niche in combat. That seems fair to me. Rock Pikmin. They're more powerful than... I'm gonna put them... I think they're like a side grade to Red Pikmin in combat. You know, they do like burst damage, which... Yeah, they do a whole burst of damage, but they don't latch on for consistent damage. So, you know, like, depending on your playstyle, like... I could see different people preferring reds or rocks based on how they approach combat in these games. You could have, you know, a whole squad of rock Pikmin charge, which is pretty cool. You could throw a bunch of them. Or you could, like, be more methodical with the red Pikmin. There are enemies which have crystal shells that you need rock Pikmin to defeat, which I believe appear more than fire enemies do. Which is good. Which is usually good because they're showing off the new Pikmin. You get them really early in the game, which means they have a lot of time to shine. There are lots of things you need the rock Pikmin to do. Pretty good. I think I would place them... Yeah, I think I would give them, like, roughly the same placement as reds. I'm going to put them... Oh yeah, their immunity to crushing, being crushed, I think actually gives them a slight edge. I think their immunity to getting crushed actually gives them a slight edge over fire resistance. Because, like... I mean, I know, listen, I know that a lot of new players, in particular, have trouble with things like lollipops. So, that seems fair to me, doesn't it? You know, the Pikmin with a niche, it has pretty good damage, it's pretty strong in general, but it also has a niche that would be really useful for new players. Or for an old player who gets caught off guard. You know, I can see it. I can see it having... I personally prefer red Pikmin, but I think rock Pikmin have, with their little niche, maybe elevates them slightly above red Pikmin. And now winged Pikmin, they're like pretty weak in terms of damage, but they're really good at fighting flying enemies. They're also the most useful at tasks. I'm just saying straight up, they're the most useful at tasks because they can fly and take a bunch of shortcuts other Pikmin can't. That is really, 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 really useful. They are fast, they are useful, they are... I'm gonna leave them on the line. They're just sort of like, nah, you know, they're good at combat in really specific situations, certain somewhat specific situations. There are enough flying enemies you can take advantage of it fairly reliably, though. Like, if you know you're taking wing Pikmin, like if you know there are flying enemies, you're going to want to take wing Pikmin to fight them, which I think is pretty good. But you don't want to overload on just wing Pikmin because of the other hazards and the fact that grounded enemies not so good for them. I think they deserve to be sort of on the baseline. You want them for their niche, but you don't want, and you want them for tasks. But the downside is enough that you're not going to like bring too many of them. Now we go to Pikmin 4. Alright, well, let's say red Pikmin. We'll do, of course, wait, where did red Pikmin. Okay. So, Pikmin 4, red Pikmin. They are pretty good in fights. You get them once, as per series tradition, they are the first Pikmin you get, which makes them, I would say, actually pretty useful. However, I think they're weaker in overall. I think they're not as useful in combat as in previous games, because with every Pikmin type except Bulbmin in the series, they're not as... Like, you've got Rock Pikmin, which you could see as a side grade. You got Purple Pikmin, which are also really good in combat. Although I believe nerfed compared to... still nerfed compared to 2. Sorry about the ship. Maybe they're fairly useful for tasks, but I mean, there's I can't actually. There's the fire burner puzzles, which make them useful. That's another kind of task. Being a type of task for specifically red Pikmin is really nice. I think I'm gonna put them sort of in the red Pikmin cluster here, but call them like the overall slightly worst one. Not because red Pikmin themselves have gotten weaker since previous games in any form. It's purely because there's so much competition, and with the 3 Pikmin type limit, do you really want to take red Pikmin as your combat Pikmin unless you already know there's going to be fire? Right? Like, it doesn't make... I'm talking about purely the main game. If we were to factor in Olimar's Shipwreck tile, I would... No. I'm not considering Olimar's Shipwreck tile here, because it only has the original 3 colors. Yellow Pikmin. Well, bomb rocks are back as an item that the captain uses. So, not for yellow Pikmin. I'm gonna go so far as to say in combat they are slightly on the weak side, because they're awkward to use and they lack, like, with electrical hazards being weak. First of all, with Ochi, I'm gonna kind of ignore Ochi, because Ochi kind of just destroys everything if you get all the upgrades, so we're gonna ignore Ochi. But yellow Pikmin, I don't know, they're like fairly niche. They don't have... There are electrical enemies, I suppose, but a lot of electrical enemies you can just fight with other Pikmin if you're careful, because electricity is like, you're stunned for a bit, and then if you don't whistle the Pikmin in time, it dies like every other hazard. Except it stuns them instead of making them panic. So, like, just whistle them. You know? However, I do remember finding a decent amount of use of yellow Pikmin in tasks. So I've noticed here that yellow Pikmin are also sort of clustering in place. Blue Pikmin. Alright, so there's a lot of water you can do. Oh, there's a lot of water stuff you can do in Pikmin 4. There's the beach area. Beautiful. Love the beach area. You can go with the tide mechanic. Blue Pikmin are like your way to explore it in the first half of the day. I would say being pretty much required to be efficient in one of the game's main areas. Yeah, that's fair. They're not that useful in the first area. They're not that useful in the house. Not that useful in the near the grill. Not really useful in the final zone. So like they're really good in like 2 areas, with a handful of caves in the other zones that you want to use them in. That's fair enough. I would perhaps consider them. I'm gonna call them like. The fact that you get them earlier as well. Like you can get the onion fairly early, I believe. So that's the fact that the fact that you can get the onions. Earlier, I think sort of elevates the yellow and blue Pikmin compared to where I was planning to put them before. Because the fact that you can get these renewable much faster than the other Pikmin types. Because the onions for every other Pikmin type, except Ice Pikmin, which are locked to the sort of post game. Do you call after the hero's hideaway the post game? Sort of the second act, sort of like final act of the game. You know, you can get the Ice Pikmin onion in the final area, but you don't get purple. You need to get purple and white Pikmin onions from doing like a side quest, from long side quests, and you get the Pikmin 3 onions in the, let's call them post-game areas. You know, it's like the Wistful Wild. You know, the game's not done yet, but you've kind of, you've done your objective. So, post-game areas. Purple Pikmin, very strong. Not super useful for tasks. And the fact that they're really hard to get as well, makes them a little bit less useful. White Pikmin, once again, weak in combat. They are sort of about as useful as in previous. They're gonna be. I'm gonna call them less useful in previous games because there's not many poison hazards. There's not much you can do, and with the 3 Pikmin type limit, the 3 Pikmin type limit on the field actually makes purple Pikmin worse, like more useless, like closer to useless. I'm not calling them useless; they're closer to being useless than Pikmin 2. The fact that you're locking in one of your 3 Pikmin types at a time for something that moves slow, or basically doesn't have like, it's just fast. You know, I could if Pikmin 4 didn't have the 3 type limit, I would have these a lot more useful. I'd have these a lot more useful than they're listed as just now. So then we get to Rock Pikmin. They're pretty strong. You don't do much with them though. Like they're kind of just there. I remember if there's a few enemies. I can see taking them into certain caves for the enemies and stuff, but I don't think you do very much with them in terms for like tasks in particular. Hold on, I'm gonna move the Pikmin 3 Rock Pikmin to be less useful tasks. There are not that many crystal balls. I'm gonna put sort of Rock Pikmin as like slightly more useful but slightly but like about as there we go. They're gonna be like a slightly more useful position than the Pikmin 4 purples. Then we get to the winged Pikmin. I feel really bad about this because I love the winged Pikmin. They're so cute, they're so cool, but I'm going to call Pikmin 4's winged Pikmin the least useful Pikmin in the entire series. Pikmin 4, they have like no shortcuts, except in like the cave you first discovered, except in like 1, maybe 2 caves. They're just not very good in Pikmin 4, and that makes me sad. I'm not going to call them completely useless. You know what? That's a little harsh. When I put them like there. You know, they're like fine, they're serviceable for battle, they're just... The 3 Pikmin type limit really, and the lack of shortcuts for them to use, really makes them just a lot less useful than I'd like them to be, you know? Alright, now. Ice Pikmin. I don't know if this is a controversial take to put Ice Pikmin as being on par with Pikmin 2 Purple Pikmin for combat. It is. It is. The freeze is like a more balanced version of the stun, so I'll put them like here. And there are... The game has a lot of Hydro Jelly. Game has a lot of Hydro Jelly, and being able to freeze water to get other Pikmin to the other side of water platform or water areas before you get blue Pikmin to go through the water. I genuinely think they're like the most useful Pikmin type in Pikmin 4. So either like they're really strong, they're versatile, they're strong in combat, they're versatile, they don't have any significant downside. They are a genuine contender for the best Pikmin in the entire series, and I would make the argument that they might, as an overall unit, be better than Pikmin 2 Purples. They're not as strong in combat, but I think their like out of combat utility genuinely makes them better than Pikmin 2's Purple Pikmin were. And Blue Pikmin, full useful. Slight buff for combat due to being immune to every element. Night missions, they're the only Pikmin you can get for night missions, so they have to be immune to everything. You can get them in caves by using glow seeds, so you can replenish your depleted Pikmin numbers in a cave. And then if there's candy pot buds, you can turn them into real Pikmin you can keep. Actually, no, however, the fact that you can't use them outside of caves, I'll make them, like, here. So, if you have any opinions you would like to share, anything you would like to say I got wrong, anything you'd like to say I got right, whatever opinions you have, I would love to hear them. And I would love to make more Pikmin videos. If you have suggestions and stuff I could talk about, maybe like I could rank Pikmin based on the renders. I could rank Pikmin based on like funny things, like I could rank Pikmin based on their bed, something silly like deciding what the Pikmin's bedtimes are, I don't know. Yeah, so thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. This is Captain Astra signing off.